Start recording. Okay, we are recording. And welcome, everyone. This is our, if I can advance my slide here, it's just not working. What's going on?
Yeah, I know.
Well,
Happens all the time.
we're off to a good start here.
Are you using your arrows? I notice sometimes with Zoom, it doesn't work with my mouse.
There it goes. I think it was just hung up.
Delay.
So, welcome everyone. This is our first monthly meeting. We kind of just thought that we should start doing these so that we had a time to just check in and just make everyone, you know, aware of what's going on presently and give some time and space to just address whatever might be on people's radar. So just a little Zoom orientation here. As I mentioned, we will be recording the presentations, but we will not be recording the questions period. We'll document questions and we can share those afterwards. Everyone, if they could please mute themselves while the presentations are going. And then you can unmute once we get to the question period. Certainly feel free to interject though, if there's any logistics that come up, any errors, or if you're getting some garbled sound or something like that, okay? So the Stroud facilitators here today are gonna be myself, Rachel Johnson, Krista Reeves, and Shannon Hicks. And then we've got the Master Watershed Steward facilitators, Carol Armstrong and George Seeds. They're part of the Chester and Delaware County Master Watershed Steward group. That's sort of our citizen science group at Stroud right now. So these monthly meetings, just some basics of how these are going to be set up. They're going to be every third Thursday of the month, okay? 2:30 to 3:30 every time. The Zoom link you use today will be the same throughout, so you can just continue to use that Zoom link, and we will send out a reminder, about a week prior to each month's meeting. And then as with this past one, we ask that the station owners and managers who receive that email go ahead and share that with volunteers and any others that may want to attend, okay? The general template that we have laid out for these meetings, an introduction of 5 to 10 minutes, and then there'll be a monthly station owner manager presentation that will be about 10 minutes. That's going to be Krista today. And then there'll be a monthly focus topic, more of a technical topic. And then we'll have open discussion for about 25 minutes. And then we'll just wrap up. So it's just an hour. One thing we have been talking about and are all in agreement about, and we're looking for feedback from everyone, but this is just a start. We're gonna probably most likely adjust the format according to just what organically comes out of these meetings. Okay, so here's today's agenda. Here we are at the beginning. Krista is going to talk about her organization's stations. She's not only a tech for Stroud, but she works with the Musconetcong Watershed Association. Then Rachel's going to talk about power and battery issues. And then we're just going to have this open discussion where folks can, ask questions. We've got some questions that can kind of help people focus if you don't have questions prepared. I'm guessing there will be some folks that have questions prepared. And then we'll just wrap up, okay? So what are the goals for these meetings? Essentially, really at the forefront, it's just time and space to check in, to ask questions, to report issues, and to network. Some of the more specifics, we are gonna have these, we're gonna try to have station owners do some, short reports to communicate what they're doing on their own projects and with their own stations. And then we'll try to have an educational time allocated in which we can talk about technical issues, maybe ecological patterns, and other topics that may come up of interest. And then just general updates from the Stroud Center. And then, just to point out, all of this is really just to support getting good data and using it for answering specific questions and for specific educational reasons. Okay, so just to point out again, this is a Delaware River Watershed Initiative funded project that we're all involved with, that being the Delaware Basin Monitoring Station Network. And within that, the primary goal continues to be to support station owners, managers, and volunteers in maintaining the stations and using the stations for their own purposes. The secondary goal, which we are starting to work on, is to analyze the basin-wide data set and to develop tools for the station owners to use and provide some guidance and context for their individual watersheds. Okay, you've probably seen this one before. This product adoption. So this is a new product. Shannon's been working on it for years, but it's only been recent that it's been more available to the public. So we're really in this area here. So everyone can feel good about the fact that you're involved in a project at its beginnings. And you can really provide a lot of good feedback and direction for the directions that we go with it. Okay, so any questions before we move on? Good. All right, I will stop sharing my screen. Oh, wait, actually I have one more. I can advance my slide there. Okay. All right, we'll move on to Krista's presentation. Krista, as I mentioned, is with the Musconetcong Watershed Association. She's going to talk about the Musconetcong River and surrounding watersheds. She's a water quality field specialist with the MWA, and she's a field technician with the Stroud Water Research Center. Okay, so I will stop share, and Krista, I will let you take over and share your screen.
Will do. All right. Hey, everybody. I think I know a lot of you here. And if I can get it to share my screen here. Why is it not wanting me to do that? No. There we go. Giving me a hard time.
Yep.
Gotta love it. All right. All right, so everybody, Dave gave me a great intro, so I don't need to go back through all of that. But I've been working with the EnviroDIYs now since 2017. I went to, I don't think it was the first, but one of the first workshops back in March there with Shannon, learning about how to program them, what you can do with them. And then I started an internship with Stroud that summer of 2017, and also as an intern with the MWA. And so we immediately started deploying these that summer, 2017, and started working with Paul Wilson, who is also on the call today, up in the PKC cluster, which is Pocono-Kittatinny cluster, and went to East Stroudsburg University and worked with sensor stations there. And then I've become an employee since that time of both the MWA and Stroud. So this is a map of where my personal sensor stations are located over in New Jersey, where it says 611 here, that's the Delaware. So this is the upper watershed where I have 2 sensors located, and then on down here. In the upper Musconetcong watershed, one of my questions there that I can answer with these EnviroDIY stations is a question of flow. As you can see there, we have the sewage authority in between 2 of our sensor stations. What we needed to know is, do we have the minimum amount of water moving through that area to dilute the effluent coming out of the sewage authority? And so we installed these 2 stations and immediately went to work taking the flow from the map channel to complete our rating curve. And once we had that rating curve, we could keep an eye on it just using the depth from the sensor. And, we ended up answering that question pretty quickly. And the answer is yes, we did have enough flow, even in a very dry year, for the effluent. So that allayed some of the concerns that the citizens had in the area. And it was brought to us by the Lake Musconetcong Council there. They're the ones that really wanted to make sure that the flow and the effluents were matching up what the sewage authority was saying. Since that time, however, the sad story, my Riverside Park sensor has been vandalized, stolen, and tossed in the river, so that is no more. But good thing is that the question was answered, so we don't need to reinstall it. Then when I was in the Pocono-Kittatinny cluster, this is a station located on Cherry Creek Wildlife Refuge. I did some research there with Paul Wilson and a couple other people, a couple other students, doing a little research on tracking the restoration that's going on there. We did a paired watershed study using the Aquashikula, and that's in a pristine protected area with lots of woody wetlands, and the Cherry Creek restoration site is not. It's a bunch of open fields. It was a golf course, so mowed right down to where the riparian buffer should be. So we did a lot of flow work there, and we took a lot of supplemental samples to create the rating curve for the turbidity and TSS. And we were able to then use that data to make hydrographs and compare the TSS data and model that to see how much sediment was flowing through the area. So we could track restoration. Now, I did this project, when it was pretty new, but I'm hoping that somebody else picks this up in the next, 5-10 years and can do this project again and see, how the restoration is coming along. Then we used, I have 2 sensors right now that are monitoring dam removals. We take a lot of supplemental samples to understand some of the trends that are happening with our sensor stations. And conductivity, turbidity are 2 of the important ones. When you're doing dam removals, you want to track the nutrients and track the sediment through an area. So we have one above and one at the sensor site, or where the dam was removed. So this is where the old Hughesville Dam was, and that's U.S. Fish and Wildlife and Princeton Hydro in there, and we're doing a fish survey. And right ahead where I'm standing to take this picture is where the sensor station is located. And this is a high traffic area. We get a lot of fishermen here that are interested in this area. And so we've gotten a lot of public interest at this site. They use it for the temperatures so that they know when the water's nice and cool to go fishing. So it's not only for the dam removal, monitoring, but we're getting a lot of public interest in this one. And then I'm using 2 sensors as well to track stormwater. These are pictures that I just took. That bad storm about 2 weeks ago, I think it was on a Wednesday. And this is a tiny little trib, if you can believe it or not. If you look at that bottom picture, this is the most upstream portion on one of the farmers' lands that we're working with. And this is the culvert that is, absolutely buried in this water. And we're trying to understand, we're doing restoration on his property, but we're trying to understand the flow here. It's a losing stream. I went back a week later after these pictures were taken. There was no water whatsoever in this tributary. But, this is, if you look at that top left picture up there, that is, again, it jumping a culvert, coming across the road, and, just amazing amounts of water. And then you can see my sensor station here. This, where the actual mayfly is located on this pole, is about, I would say, 5 feet up on, the side of the bank. And you can't even see my staff gauge. It's completely underwater here. And I couldn't have even walked up. I did take some turbidity samples or some water samples to then run for TSS. I didn't get to do that, but I did use a turbidity meter to verify the information coming off of the sensors down below to, basically do a quality control check and to see how those were functioning. But we're definitely trying to track stormwater. So what we're using most here is the depth and the turbidity. But that's not to say that we've been approached by Watershed Institute and the DEP, the Bureau of Freshwater and Biological, for our conductivity data. So it's not only, the purposes that you're putting them in for. This network has broader implications. You can take this data as long as it's QC'd and they see your QC records. The DEP is starting to accept data like this because they're doing a big road salt study in New Jersey. And, they're working with us now to accept this data. So, and the Watershed Institute through New Jersey Watershed Watch. So, have to realize the broader implications of, your sensor station other than the project that you're using it for. So that's what I'm doing with these sensor stations. Thank you guys very much. And I'll turn it back over to Dave.
Okay. Thank you, Krista. That was excellent. So we will simply, I guess, briefly share my screen and advance to Rachel. So Rachel's going to talk about power and battery issues and provide some recommendations. As I mentioned, Rachel is a research engineer technician at the Stroud Water Research Center. So Rachel, take it away.
Take it away. All right. This topic is actually super timely because we're running into a lot of battery issues now that we're in the thick of summer and the vegetation is super grown in. So although it seems like a simple topic, it's actually a lot of information that goes into the subtleties of battery issues and understanding the voltages in your station. And we're just going to give a brief overview of all things that might help you understand battery and subsequently kind of helps in your maintenance. So just a general explanation of the functioning of your station. There's a solar panel that's mounted on a mounting bracket that the wire runs down, goes through a cable gland at the bottom of the logger box, plugs into the mayfly. So the solar panel is powering your lithium ion polymer battery, which I'll be calling LiPo battery, just the type of battery that we choose. So the solar panel charges your battery, and the battery is what powers the mayfly. Then the mayfly does everything else. It connects to the sensors, it records the data to the SD card, and then we'll send it online if there's a cellular telemetry board. We use LiPo batteries that we buy from Adafruit. That's the vendor we use. And we use typically these 3 different sizes. They're all 3.7 volts. The main difference besides the price is these numbers right here, the 2500, 4400, and 6600 mAh, which stands for milliamp hour, which is basically just the storage capacity of the battery. So in simple terms, if you have 2 identical data loggers, neither plugged in to a solar panel, one using this smaller battery and one with this larger battery, the one with the larger battery is going to last longer. But however, that means that the larger battery takes a longer time to charge and may need a larger solar panel depending on the amount of sun that's available. And just wanted to point out that each station is really site specific. So we'll go through that a little bit. But the main point here is if you're purchasing batteries, don't purchase any batteries that we don't recommend. Adafruit is one vendor you can get them from. On Adafruit's website, they also mention that DigiKey is another place where you can buy this same battery. But the polarity of the wires is what's really important. Most LiPo batteries are made for radio-controlled cars and aircraft, where the polarity is actually backwards. So if you plug that into the mayfly, it can blow up the mayfly, no longer will be usable, and could also be a potential fire hazard because LiPo batteries could potentially catch fire. So something to be aware of. It's rare, but you just want to make sure if you're purchasing a battery, you purchase the ones that we're recommending. And I'll give you the links to that later on. The LiPo battery sits here at the top of the logger box, and the wire runs down and plugs into this little connector that's called a JST cable connector, which is just the type of connector that it is. But I wanted to point out where exactly on the board it plugs in. These two jacks, JST connectors, they are the same thing. It can go into either one, and it's labeled right here on the mayfly board, LiPo bat. So if you ever get confused, because there are a few other connectors on there that it can go in, just check the mayfly board, and really tiny writing, it says LiPo bat. We typically put it in this farther left one because the cell board will plug into this one. But again, it's the same thing. It doesn't really matter which one you put it in. These are the different size solar panels that we have. We typically use this middle one. Again, the only difference, aside from price, is that this one on the left is more powerful, about 3 times more powerful than this one on the right. So if you're in a super shady area that doesn't get much sun, we may use this larger solar panel. But typically, almost all the stations have this medium-sized 3.5 watt panel, or if you're in full sun, we might use a smaller one. But all the solar panels have a wire that runs out of the back of it that plugs into this, what we're calling an extension cable. The solar panel plugs into this waterproof jack here, and then the other side is another JST connector that plugs into the mayfly right next to the LiPo bat connectors that is labeled solar on both sides. And then when the LiPo battery and the solar panel are connected, the battery will charge from solar energy. So when they're both connected, this is the battery wire here, and then this is the solar panel wire here. This little, I don't know if you could see it too well, but it's a little orangish yellow LED light that will be on. And mostly all times when you go out to your station, you'll see this little light on, but it can be an indicator. It means that the battery is charging. So if you don't see this light on, it can mean one of two things. One, the battery is fully charged and it's not charging, and you can tell that by if your data is online and there's no problem, you're just out there cleaning your sensors. If the light is on but the data are still live, then that's fine. But if your station has dropped offline and you're going out to check it out, see what's going on, and this light isn't there, then it can be an indicator that there's a malfunction in the battery or the solar panel and that the battery is not charging. When thinking about voltages, in the next couple of slides, I'm going to be going over battery voltage graphs that I pulled off of Monitor My Watershed. But I wanted to kind of create this basic rule of thumb. When you're looking at your battery voltage online, what does it mean? So generally, following these rules, 4 volts or above is a fully charged battery. 4.2 is technically the most charged that it can be. So if it's hanging around 4 volts, then there's no problem. Between 3.7 and 3.9, also that's great. It's sufficiently charged. It's basically full charge battery. This 3.7 is what we kind of throw out a lot to keep an eye for. It's technically called the nominal voltage, which is just the middle ground of the low voltage cutoff, which is 3 volts, and fully charged, which is 4.2. So the batteries really like to stay around 3.7 unless it's in direct sunlight. It's completely happy at 3.7 volts. When it starts to drop below 3.7, that's when your red flags might go up a little bit. And you want to start keeping an eye on the patterns of the graphs that you're looking at. So between 3.5 and 3.7 volts, it's still okay. The station will function perfectly fine. But you really want to start to get keyed in on exactly what's going on. Maybe that's normal for your station. Maybe that's abnormal if it's in full sun. So really, still, there's no action needed to be taken here, but you just want to start paying more attention to what's going on. Maybe it's winter and the daylight hours are short, so the battery is just not staying charged fully. But once it drops below this 3.5, that's when there may be action. You know, you want to go out to your sensor station, see what's going on, see if something's covering the solar panel. Maybe, you know, Krista mentioned vandalism, maybe someone stole your solar panel, or maybe everything is fine and it's just not getting enough sunlight dependent on the time of year, and you might need to purchase a separate battery and charger to start swapping out batteries when the voltage gets that low, because anywhere below 3.5, your battery may die if it's at 3.3, 3.4, or the data just stopped going online and they may still be logging to the SD card. So getting into some graphs and how to tell what the online data is really telling you. These are going to be good charging patterns, proper charging patterns. So this is an example of a station that's in full sun at Wrigley Creek State Park. You can see here the up and down pattern is basically at the bottom, that's at night, right? So the battery drains overnight when there's no sun, and then during the day, it charges back up. I don't know if you can see these values on the side here, but this is battery voltage. And it's going between above 4.0 and almost to fully charged at 4.18. So this right here up until this point is pretty much as good as you can expect. That's what you really want out of your battery. I wanted to point out these dates down here around the same time that Krista was showing those big floods on her in her presentation. This was around the time of the hurricane. So we had a couple of days of cloudy weather, rainy, stormy weather. I wanted to point out that the battery doesn't draw too much, although there's no sun. It still functions, the solar panel functions off of ambient light. So even in the really stormy weather, it only went down to above 4 volts, which is still a perfectly functioning voltage, but it does get a little lower than the normal full sun. Now, this is one of our most forested stations up in New York. And if you look at the time of year, it's in January. So the angle of the sun is lower, there's less daylight hours, and you can see these little upticks are all the solar panel charging the battery, but it's just happily hanging around 3.7 volts. And there was no major draws, so everything is still fine, although it's not up in that 4 range. This is that same station once we start to come out of winter. The daylight gets longer, the angle of the sun changes a bit, and now we go from the 3.7, 3.8 from the winter, and it returns back to 4 volts, fully charged. So again, getting accustomed to your specific station, what it looks like during the different times of year, that can really help you in your troubleshooting. And when something goes wrong, the red flags go up and you can be more keened into what your station specifically does. This is another forested station in Punches Run and Nolde State Forest. And And it's a good example, again, of the different times of year. So when there's not really too much foliage out, it's charging every day. There's up and down patterns above 4 volts. But then at the end of May, when everything starts to grow in, that's when it's still charging. You can see those up and down patterns. It's still getting light, but the battery is being drawn from more than it's charging. So there's an overall downward trend. And then these spikes are when someone goes out and changes the battery. So that'll probably continue until the end of fall when the leaves fall off, and then it'll most likely go back up into this 4 volt range. This is another example. Around the end of summer every year, this station has trouble keeping a charge. So you can tell, again, these spikes, it is being charged, but there's an overall slight downward trend. So it was hanging around 3.7 and everything was going fine until it starts getting to this 3.5 range. And then eventually the battery died around 3.4 volts. Now this one stood out to me. It's Sandy Run. You can tell there's no upward ticks at all. It's just an overall downward trend. So this is something, if you see something like this compared to any of the previous ones that have these upward swings of charging, this is something that's going to tell you your solar panel isn't working. Either your solar panel got disconnected, or maybe a rodent chewed the wire, or again, vandalism. People do like to take these solar panels because they are one of the easier parts to remove off of the station. All it takes is a wrench and you can walk away with the solar panel. So if you ever see anything like this, you'll want to go out to your station and double check, make sure everything is okay. This is actually a station that we had to hide, so we took the solar panel off. So I thought that would be a good example to show what it looks like when there's no solar panel connected. And then another abnormality, in the beginning here, it's a completely normal charging pattern, staying around 4 volts. And then all of a sudden, over a span of a couple of days, it goes from 4 volts down to 3.4 volts, very rapidly, very suddenly, with no overall pattern or trend. So this is something that you would want to go out and check your sensor station. Anything wacky that happens like this, there's something going on, and it requires more investigation. So if your battery is not keeping up efficiently, there's a few things you can do. One is going out to your site and making sure the solar panel is clear. This is actually, the station's hidden under here. So obviously if the solar panel is covered, it's not going to be able to charge your battery. So you can go out and make sure that it's clear and can see the sun. If it is cleared, another thing you can do is try to change the angle depending on the time of year. You can shift it. Maybe in the summer, there's a lot of vegetation, but there's a little gap in the east where it can catch the morning sun. Just playing around with your specific site, seeing if you can catch any part of sun that will charge your battery. Again, the U-bolt that holds on the solar panel bracket, it can be loosened with a 7/16 inch wrench. That's all you need to rotate your solar panel. Sometimes you can even just twist them a little bit. If none of that works, you might have to buy a spare battery and battery charger so that you can cycle through batteries. Again, like I mentioned, to only buy the batteries that we are recommending. You only want to buy this charger setup that we recommend, again, because the polarities of the battery, this thing can get really hot and start smoking if the thing is plugged in backwards. Luckily, with this specific setup and our battery, there's really no way to plug it in backwards. If it's not going in easily with 1 or 2 fingers, then just flip it around. It can only go in one way. But the information to purchase the battery and the battery charger is all on our online manual in section 8, specifically 8.2.6. So you can find those links there to purchase. And the way that it works is super easy, super simple. You plug the wall charger into the outlet, and then this red wire is a USB on one side and a C, like on an Android phone, on the other side. So they won't go in opposite ways. You plug the USB into the wall charger, the opposite end into the little red board, and this power light will come on, showing you that it's being powered. And then once the battery is connected, a little yellow light will come on with the word charge above it, so you know that it's charging. And a green light will pop up when it's done with the words done there. And we recommend to only charge batteries when you can keep an eye on them. Again, for that fire hazard, you don't want to leave something there for a couple days, go home for the weekend or whatever it may be, and then come back and a disaster has happened. These boards are pretty safe and have some safety circuitry in there, but just to be super safe, you want to always be around when your batteries are charging and be fairly gentle with them. You don't want to drop them from high distances or chuck them across the room or anything like that. So the last thing I'll go over is just how to swap out your battery if you do have to do that. First thing you want to do is turn off your mayfly. It's kind of like when you're trying to pull out a flash drive or USB drive without ejecting it first. It could have the potential of messing up the data file that's on there if you just yank the battery out. So you want to turn off the mayfly, unplug the original battery from that LiPo bat plug, plug the new one in, and then turn the mayfly back on. And then you always want to double check if your station is online, double check your data, make sure everything is back online and functioning properly before you walk away, just to save yourself the extra trip. So some resources that we have available to troubleshoot, again, the online sensor station manual, specifically section 8. The whole section 8 is really helpful for battery tips and hints. Within that section, we have a troubleshooting quick guide that mentions a lot of this information that I'm talking about. This PowerPoint presentation will be posted to the Wiki Watershed page. So if you want to print this out and keep it with you in case you're in the field and have any questions, welcome to do that, or just refer to it as you need. And then after you troubleshoot and try everything on your own, always feel free to email Shannon, Dave Bressler, and I for any other questions. So we'll be going into our general questions and discussions section. But if you have any specific questions about batteries or anything that I just discussed, feel free to ask them. And I will stop sharing my screen.
Okay, thank you, Rachel. I am going to share my screen now. And seems like everyone has their videos on. So we are in our question period now. So, and I am going to pause the recording.